Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, September 10th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the Georgia Senate race. Raphael Warnock, Herschel Walker, both against each other in this extremely competitive Senate race, in which new polls from the state from Insider Advantage, Emerson College, and the Trafalgar Group, all polls that have been taken within the past 3 weeks. Prior to, we had not had a poll since July from Fox News, all of which showing Herschel Walker ahead by 1, 2, and 3 points. Not respectively, I said it in the wrong order, but 1, 2, and 3 points, bringing us to an average of Walker leading by about 0.5%. Now, these new polls show a change in direction, at least a change in direction from where the previous polls were telling us. Because for every single poll between the time of April and July, Raphael Warnock had been ahead. Herschel Walker had not led in a poll since April 1st through 3rd, and prior to that, January, and then before that, March of 2021. So to get to a point where now you've had continuous increase for the Democratic Party on the national generic ballot, Biden's approval rating has gotten significantly better from where it was at the time in which Warnock led by about 3 points, and we've come to a point where the Democratic Party is on track for pickups in Pennsylvania, potentially in Wisconsin, locking down Nevada and Arizona, but all of a sudden, 3 polls consistently show Walker ahead by 1, 2, and 3 points, bringing us to an average, when you add in the Fox News number, of Walker being ahead by 0.5%. And an even more notable shift from Fox 5 Insider Advantage, they did a poll back in July that showed Warnock ahead by 3. They did one actually after the Fox News poll, which was pretty in tune with practically all of the other pollsters that were done within the race, or polls that were done within the race. Then it comes to a point where now Warnock has lost support by about 3%, bringing Walker to about 47% in terms of the overall average, Warnock going down 4% statewide. So a pretty significant increase, a 6-point swing in favor of the GOP on average, and that's certainly not a good look for the Democratic Party, especially knowing that a lot of other things have gotten better. But I think there is necessary context when we look at these numbers that might make Democrats realize that maybe these polls aren't the ones that should be the most important when it comes down to predicting the Georgia Senate race. You see, the Georgia Senate race was recently polled, just a year ago in the January 2021 runoff elections. In fact, by the 3 recent pollsters that have just released numbers within the state. When you take a look at those numbers, it starts to paint this picture that, hey, they don't always get Georgia correct. When it came down to a race between Loeffler and Warnock, the 3 pollsters, again, Emerson, Insider Advantage, and Fox 5 together, and Trafalgar, all of which showed Loeffler either leading or the candidates in a tie. Trafalgar had Loeffler leading by 2. She lost by 2, a 4-point swing. Emerson had Loeffler ahead by 3. She lost by 2, a 5-point swing. And Fox 5 and Insider Advantage had a tie, a 2-point swing in favor of the Democratic Party. That is significant. It's significant enough to say that looking at these 1, 2, and 3-point leads, that maybe these numbers are off. Whereas another example of this, well, also in the runoff elections between Ossoff and Perdue, Trafalgar and Fox 5 Insider Advantage had a tie. Ossoff won by about a 1-point shift. Nothing super significant, but still a shift in favor of the Democrats between the results and the overall average. And Emerson College said that Ossoff was going to lose by 3. He ended up winning by 1, a 4-point swing in favor of the Democrats. So looking at the runoff polls, in a time between 2 candidates against each other, they didn't seem to be super accurate. Let's take a look at the presidential election results. Well, these were done between Trump and Biden, again, 2 candidates against each other. The overall average, wrong. Said Trump would win by 1, he ended up losing by 0.3. Not off by a super substantial amount, but still off. The RCP average, a 1-point lead, was contributed largely in part by 2 pollsters within this race that are polling the same Senate race. Trafalgar Group said that Trump would win by 5. He lost by 0.3. That's a 5-point swing. Emerson College said Trump would win by 1. They were wrong. The Democrats ended up winning. And when you take a look at Insider Advantage, another pollster that also works with Fox 5 to do their poll in the state, the one that we were looking at for 2022, they said Trump would win by 2. He ended up losing again. So looking at the Georgia polls from 2020 and 2021, at least recently, these 3 pollsters have not exactly had the best track record when it came down to predicting the state. So that could be very well true for these upcoming midterms. But at the same time, I'm not trying to refute the validity of these polls. I said that way more different than I should have. But the validity of these polls is not to be questioned simply because they got 2020 and 2021 wrong. I think that would be a bit disingenuous if you ask me when it comes down to the races. I do believe that, looking at past polls, 2018, for instance, Trafalgar said that Kemp was going to win by 12, but Emerson College got it right on. They said that Kemp was going to win by 2, and that's practically what he won by. The average here was Kemp plus 3, and that was very similar to the actual results. But the point here is that I do want to recognize that in the Senate races, they aren't the most accurate, which means the Democrats probably should not act as if this race is in any circumstance a foregone conclusion for the Republican Party. I also think that Raphael Warnock, while a strong candidate, still finds himself in a less favorable environment than a year ago. The reason why he won in 2021 was because Democrats were still riding high. They were still doing very well nationally speaking, despite the overall average now being very different. And they also were doing very well coming out of an election in which they won control of the House, won the presidency, and the Senate elections truly could have been a referendum against President Biden. But guess what? Voters liked Biden at the time. By the time he took office, about 15 days following the election for Raphael Warnock's Senate seat, Biden was up by 20 points nationwide. Today, he's down by 11. That is a 31-point swing in terms of the overall net, and Warnock is still holding on. I think Herschel Walker is not the best candidate. I think if we were to replace him with a stronger GOP nominee, such as Brian Kemp or Doug Collins, that this Senate race would be locked down for Republicans. And quite frankly, Republicans are doing significantly better in the state of Georgia than in any other competitive Senate race as of right now beyond North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin. 3 states they already hold. The state of Georgia should have been an automatic pickup opportunity, and in many ways, it very well can be. My prediction and expectation for the race is tilt for the Democratic Party, which honestly is not the best characterization. It's also lower than where it was previously. For the first time in a long time, I've had now my Senate map at a 51-49 majority in favor of the Democrats, with Democrats expecting to pick up a seat, but I expect the state of Georgia to be more competitive than the state of Pennsylvania, a state where I expect the Democrats to pick up a Senate seat, because considering right now Pat Toomey currently holds it, a Republican senator, that would be the pickup. But that, surprisingly enough, isn't the most competitive race. Republicans are lucky that these news numbers show them ahead in the state of Georgia because it also changes the narrative. It shows that Walker is electable, and it shows the national GOP that this is a race to continuously focus on. I just made a video earlier today talking about how we saw in the state of Arizona. By the way, the FiveThirtyEight average has Walker ahead by 1, but realistically, when you're taking a look at a lot of the recent numbers, it's only being balanced out by this one poll done back in July through August 1st, which doesn't even have a rating on it altogether. I would say I would trust the overall average with Walker ahead, but again, no real concerns here. It's still a close and competitive race. But the state of Arizona is a state that I covered in today's video earlier because right now the Republican Party does not seem to be too keen on allocating funds to the race. And that's probably because there hasn't been any data telling us that Blake Masters is on track for victory. Even Trafalgar, a Republican pollster, one that consistently overestimates Republican support in the state of Arizona and other states, including the state of Georgia, as I showed you in 2020, 2018, and 2021, they even said that Mark Kelly was winning by 4 points statewide, adjusted here about 3 points. Regardless, it's a victory for Mark Kelly, and Republicans are starting to recognize that some races simply are too far out of reach for the national GOP. I think that the Senate race right now in the state of Arizona is still very much in play. I don't buy that Mark Kelly is going to win the election by 6 points, but I think the national GOP might. And they also definitely have a lot more access to data and a lot more access to internal numbers than I do. They might see this race for what it is. It's right now a likely Democratic state by the FiveThirtyEight forecast and a lean Democratic expectation for the eventual midterms, which means that they shouldn't heavily invest. Georgia, on the other hand, is completely different. There is also something that I will say that is helping the Republican Party in the state of Georgia that isn't found in the state of Arizona, and that is an exceptional nominee on the governor's side leading this race with a 6-point lead statewide. Brian Kemp barely won in 2018 as the Secretary of State. He was able to win that primary with the Trump endorsement, but definitely was not on track to easily win his election, and quite frankly, he didn't. But what he did do correct ahead of 2022 was survive, and not only survive, obliterate his Trump-endorsed opponent, David Perdue, by about 50 points statewide. Despite Trump hating Brian Kemp for absolutely no reason beyond the fact that Brian Kemp certified the 2020 election result as any good governor might. And that's not me calling Brian Kemp good. I think the movement and the decision, to make that certification was a good move, but I'm not going to speak on, my likes or dislikes of the governor. I'm just looking at him from the objective standpoint. He has done well. He has done well because his approval rating is high, and voters seem to like him a lot more now than they did in 2018. Could that be a product of our national environment? Absolutely. I think Stacey Abrams ran in the wrong year, and while she does certainly have a political future, I don't think it comes in 2022. But then again, it might happen. Things have happened in American politics that are significantly crazier in different types of years, against different types of agendas and movements, etc., etc. But right now, Brian Kemp is leading. Not a single poll shows Stacey Abrams ahead across the state, and that's good for Brian Kemp. I mean, quite literally, not one since the inception of this race. And it was practically a foregone conclusion that Stacey Abrams was going to run. Overall, this is a 6-point lead for the GOP. This helps the down-ballot Republicans, including Herschel Walker, who associated with Brian Kemp might be able to narrowly cross over the finish line. If we were looking at a better year for the GOP, or at least a better Senate candidate for the GOP, we would be looking at very similar numbers to the governor's race, with a 6-point lead statewide, not certainly at all being out of the question for the Republican Party. I think what we have found in many of these Senate races is that the GOP simply has proposed and propped up lackluster candidates who don't seem to be cutting it to the swing voter. But in some of these governor's races, they have. Carrie Lake in Arizona, Brian Kemp in the state of Georgia. Carrie Lake certainly not to the same extent as Brian Kemp. Kemp is the incumbent, and Carrie Lake is sometimes leading by 1, sometimes down by 1. She's in a very competitive race. Brian Kemp, on the other hand, is likely to outperform where he was in 2018, despite the overall state itself becoming more Democratic. And you also have to realize that Brian Kemp, as the governor, has the power to incentivize voters to vote for him. For instance, repealing the gas tax. That's something that voters really seem to like, and Stacey Abrams, quite frankly, can't do that because she isn't the governor. So anything positive associated with the governor's office, done by executive action within the state of Georgia, will look positively on Brian Kemp. And right now, that's moving the right direction for the GOP. And you can find that to be true in the Senate race. I'm still holding strong with my tilt Democrat characterization of the state of Georgia, but I will say that should Herschel Walker win it in November, no one should be shocked. This race was always going to be competitive. I would even, in fact, be more shocked if Walker loses by 2 to 3 points rather than wins the election. Because the default here is that the Republicans do win. And that's what these polls have reverted us to. Despite the national environment moving in a different direction, every other state, quite frankly, moving in an opposite direction to this one, Georgia does not seem to care. They are propping up Walker for a variety of reasons, and while it is something that on the outside, as someone who was looking at from the political analyst standpoint, I didn't really expect based off of Walker's candidacy, in terms of his candidate value, in terms of what Republicans have seen on the national level. I mean, practically everywhere, special elections, regular elections, referendums, polling data, fundraising numbers, voter registration numbers, all of it seems to be turning the tides in favor of the Democratic Party, but Georgia says, I don't care. I'm still voting for Walker. To reiterate, though, from what I said in the beginning of the video, these 3 pollsters were wrong in 2020, were wrong in 2021, and 2 of them were wrong in 2018. They were off. They incorrectly predicted previous elections, so they could be wrong this election cycle. But they still are the only bits of data that we have for this cycle as of August and September 2022, so we still have to recognize that it's there. And I don't think it's a coincidence that all 3 of them show Walker ahead for the first time in any poll since the beginning of April. Even if they are off, something has shifted amongst these voting groups. Even if they were off before, maybe underestimating Warnock, and they still might be now, that probably meant Warnock was up by a higher amount previously than what was actually being led on by the poll. But there certainly has been a shift, and that cannot be ignored. Right now, the Republicans do seem to be in a position where they could pull ahead in the Senate race. As you can see, following the releasing of many of these polls, the betting markets have dumped significantly away from the Democratic Party and in favor of Republicans, who now lead on the overall betting markets in the state of Georgia for the first time since late June. I mean, quite literally, the end of June was the last time Republicans were ahead here, and now it's happening again. Despite everything else moving away from the GOP, the state of Georgia simply is not. It is going to be one of the most competitive races, and honestly, I would not be surprised if it is, in fact, the most competitive race this election cycle. We've been talking about Nevada, we've been talking about other states, Arizona, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, even as potentially the most close and competitive race. but the state of Georgia very well might be. And knowing our national environment, knowing what we are looking at right now, truly, we could be seeing a decided majority based off of a December runoff election in the state of Georgia, depending on what happens this November. It'd be a repeat of 2020 and 2021 again, except new laws in Georgia move the move the runoff election about a month ahead, but it will be quite interesting to take a look at. So overall, what I see is, a state itself, or a state that's going to be extremely, extremely competitive. And I think as of now, the Democrats and Republicans are in a very, very close position where anything can change the trajectory of the race. The Republican Party certainly is gaining momentum within this race despite the entire nation moving in an opposite direction. But sometimes that's just how politics is. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.